Thank you very much, David. And thank you for inviting me for this. It's been a phenomenal day yesterday. Phenomenal. Good. So I'm going to talk about something funny, showers. So a few years ago, I was struggling. I was struggling with money. I was looking to invest some money, and I was thinking that there was no way that I, as the small guy, could compete against the Goldmans, against the Morgan Stanleys of the world, and that was frustrating me. At the same time, I was thinking about a pill. If you remember that movie, Limitless, you've got Bradley Cooper swallowing this pill, and it makes him a superhuman thinker. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could get my hands on that pill and I would compete with these folks? I'd become very smart suddenly for a change. And I was thinking about nature as well. How networked intelligence happens naturally in nature. Look at this fish here. They all bull up when threatened. And it's something they've learned over years and years, or maybe billions of years in their case. And we as humans are a networked intelligence, at least we believe so, where that networked intelligence is, in many ways, greater than the sum of its parts. So those were my thoughts. And suddenly, it came to me very, very clearly that if species like these, like us, could network intelligence, would it be possible for us to network AI so that we could create an extremely scalable system, virtually infinitely scalable system that would enable me to compete with the big guys, but also solve a lot more problems? That was my shower. And so I got out of my shower, I got dressed, and I started to work on this. And my first action was to call a dear friend of mine, a fellow by the name of Babak, with whom I had worked on building the technology that eventually became Siri. And I thought, together, can we try to build that infinitely scalable system that would take on huge problems, world problems? So I called Babak. Now that's not Babak. Who knows who that is? Darwin. Well done. Charles Darwin. So a couple of centuries ago, Charles Darwin came up with a revolutionary theory that natural selection bred evolvable, bred adaptable species. And of course, it's well understood now, we all believe that this is true. But what's interesting is that this has been ported into software in the second half of the last century. John Holland here, the late John Holland, right here, took those Darwinian concepts and ported them to software and created a new AI discipline called, you would guess, Evolutionary Intelligence. So what can this do? One of his students, John Kosa, right here, took this and went to the next level. He started to breed autonomous software agents. Those were able to solve enormously complex problems. What he did was, and it's an amazing story, he built a 1,000 CPU Beowulf cluster. And he started with this. He started to invent or reinvent things. For example, he reinvented a bunch of logic circuits. He started to make factories more efficient using his machine. He called that machine the invention machine. And 10 years ago, that machine was the first machine ever to be awarded a patent. Can you imagine that? A patent awarded to a machine? That is a very cool thing. So that was the body of work in a discipline. And we thought, can we take that body of work and do better, advance the science, take it to the next level? And we had a big problem to solve. The financial markets are extremely dynamic, complex. It's an extraordinarily difficult ecosystem to survive and thrive in. So as we did this, well, thought about this, we thought, this is Babak. We thought the requirement for us to be successful is that we scale the system so that it can harness and run on 1 million CPUs. So 1 million CPUs doesn't come like this. It takes time, it takes energy. Not only that, you've got to architect a system so that it can scale to that level of power. And no one had done scaled AI to the level which we were trying to scale it to. So we set to work. Took us years, a lot of money. Took us years, but eventually we got our first AI species, our first AI traders. And I guess you're thinking that they look like this. No, they did not look like this. They look like that. This is an actual program that's running. This system creates trillions and trillions of traders. They are born, they compete, they survive, they die, they thrive, they reproduce, they mutate, they become a species that eventually begins to dominate its environment. That's how it looks like. But we saw that this system which we had built, and this trades every day, by the way, we thought that this system which we had built could do a lot more. I mean, trading is great, but there's probably more important things in this world. So we thought about, can we take the system and take it to the hospital floor, health care, sick care. And the first place there where we thought this would have an impact is the ICU. Now, I've heard times and times again that data is collected everywhere in every industry, and it's more and more the case, and data is not used. I cannot imagine one better place to actually use data than the ICU. It's about saving lives. It's about life and death. Can we actually make use of that data for a change? So we set out to work on this with an idea was let's create some sort of an AI nurse, something like that. Now, this nurse would be always on the clock, always on the lookout for you. She would be monitoring your vitals at any given time. She would be preempting problems as she is forecasting that things are going to go down the drain. So we thought that this is what we would like to build. It turned out to be looking like this. But this thing actually is real. So we built this program, this system, in partnership with MIT, and to start to solve the single most critical issue that ICUs have in the US, which is sepsis. So for those of you who don't know, sepsis is a blood infection. And it affects about 1 million patients a year in the US. Out of 1 million, depending on the year, between 28% and 50% of these patients die. But to put things in perspective, that's more than prostate cancer, breast cancer, and AIDS combined. So that's a big problem. And it's a big problem also in terms of cost. It costs the ICUs $20 billion a year just treat sepsis. So we thought, is there something we can do here? We worked with not only MIT, but also practitioners at the University of Toronto, and specifically St. Michael's Hospital there. And we asked them the question, what is that you need for us to make a difference? And they told us we needed to give them a 30-minute head start. give us a 30-minute warning so that we know sepsis is coming, and we'll be able to treat it in this case. So we spent about a year collecting data, 6,000 patients. We're talking arterial blood pressure data, beat by beat. That's an enormous amount of data. And we set our AI nurse to work. And she came back with remarkable outcomes. We were able to predict the onset of sepsis 30 minutes ahead of time with more than 91% accuracy. So that is saving lives. And that's possible. There's all this data in ICUs that's right there for the taking. Now, what was important here for us is that we had taken this system and shown to ourselves that, look, this can trade, this can do other things, that can solve real-world problems. We are now working with Oxford here in this country on the genomic side. And what's interesting here is that we're using artificial evolution to solve problems brought about by our own biological evolution. The good thing about artificial evolution is that it doesn't take billions of years to solve problems. You can solve it in days, weeks, months, but not billions of years. It's taken us billions of years to solve our problem, adapt to our environment, right? Now, how do we make this possible? We make this possible because we do have a very, very, very large system. So when I say very large, that is very large. We've got 2 million CPU cores, 5,000 GPU cards. It's one of the largest farms, if not the largest farm in the world when it comes to GPU cards. And that compute power is located in 4,000 sites worldwide. So no AI has run at these scales ever before. Maybe in the military, certainly not in the civilian sector. So that is what we've built. Now, we're greedy. We always think, what's next? Can we make it smarter, better? And of course, one way to make it smarter, better is to ramp this, to increase the scale. And we can do this. There's no theoretical limits to the scale which I showed you. This is a very large-scale system, and we'll scale more, and we are working on this. We will work on this. But there's more things to this. There is something called perception. Now, we all have senses, right? We all sense the world. Now, the assumption is if you sense more of the world, if you perceive more of the world, you are going to make more informed decisions. And by making more informed decisions, chances are you will make better decisions. So we set out to work on perception. So this could imply understanding visual content, video content, audio, and the list goes on. We set out to start to work on visual first. Now, when we work in our company, we try to solve actual world problems. And one thing that we always try to apply our technology to things which we think will be interesting, make a difference, change people's lives, change people's experience, practical stuff. So we set out to work on this, and we saw there is an area where visual content is not well addressed, and that's, for example, the shopping experience. So let me talk to you a bit about this, the shopping experience. If you can imagine an AI virtual assistant, a virtual shopping assistant that dynamically curates the content of a store. As you immerse yourself in that store, you walk through that store. Now, that it will be difficult for you to picture this until I tell you the story, or a story. And that's a story we all have gone through. I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes a video about shoes. Now, imagine you're walking into a shoe store, a physical shoe store. They still exist. Now, if you walk into a shoe store, you're not going to do a Google query with a salesperson. you're going to point at the window or at the shelf, and you're going to say, I like that. And then the salesperson is going to say, oh, you like that? Let me show you optionality around this thing you just pointed at, right? So a range of things. And then you might say, you know what, within this, I like this. And then you'll get more optionality. Or you can say, forget about this. What I really like is that. And this is lateral thinking. So what's happening here is that you're having, in real time, a dialogue with that shop's catalog through the salesperson. That's what's happening. And we said, let's take that experience, that paradigm, let's take it and make it real, but online, in the virtual world. Think about this. We always say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Or you know it when you see it. That's what we're doing here. So we partnered with shoes.com to launch this in North America in the next few weeks. So what you're actually going to see now in this video, we have never shown to anybody before. As you see it, what you realize is there is no querying, no typing, none of this. There's no tagging. This is not about these shoes look like this or does this, or there's no tags, no meta tags. And there is also no taking pictures and sending that to some sort of search engine. It's friction-free access to things which you want but cannot Google. Now, as you see the video, focus on the left-hand side of the screen where the smartphone is, and you'll see how the shop actually changes, the catalog changes as the system begins to understand the user's intent. Let's go at this. So this experience here, where, again, it's friction-free access to things you cannot Google. You could never Google for that shoe. I cannot Google for the little black dress. I cannot Google for the black leather sofa with this size of a armrest or this stand from the floor. There is things which you cannot Google, and a lot of things, and increasingly more things. And that technology solves this. So I've shown you in 15 minutes, I've shown you how massively scaled AI can be applied to decision-making, to prediction, to perception. That's what we do. Now, this is, in all honesty, this is first base. This is year one. This is decade one of AI. There's a lot of things we can do going forward. We've just begun. With this, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed it.
Wow, lots of questions, Antoine. Just take the financial markets side of AI. How effective is your algorithm compared with the normal stock market?
It is very effective. I can't say too much about, what our performance, and because that's very, very proprietary. But one thing I can say is that the performance that we've gotten has been completely uncorrelated with anything out there, whether it's the market itself, funds, hedge funds, which is interesting. You know, survival of the fittest starts with being able to ride issues or ride problems. And it is very clear to us that this evolutionary process has led to the ability of the system to survive ups and downs in the market very, very well, and eventually thrive to create great performance.
And is this based on taking billions of data points and looking at predictive patterns?
Yes, though it's going all the way to making decisions. So that feedback loop is critical. So the search space is enormous. It is unfathomable. In fact, I had my co-founder Babak compute the search space and also compute the time it would take to traverse it. And it would take more than the age of the Earth to traverse 1% of it using 1 billion computers. So obviously you cannot model the markets, right? This is not modelable. But what you can do is you can use a very smart system to traverse the search space and iteratively, through this recursive loop, learn what works and what doesn't.
A few months ago, I wrote a Wired cover story about DeepMind, a London-based company that Google bought that's trying to solve general artificial intelligence. And they are sucking up all the talent they can in a 5-story building in King's Cross. Yes. Presumably, you're the North American version of this. How many people do you have, if it's not a secret, and how is it organized? Yeah,
we've got almost 100 people. We've grown by 100% this past 12 months. Most of them in San Francisco. And we've made, the reason why we got out of stealth mode a year ago was to attract people and to do what DeepMind did back here in London, which was, I think, phenomenally successful. And we want effectively to replicate this. And it's harder in the Bay Area simply because of the hunt for talent is extremely aggressive, and we have to fight. But we have to fight, and we can fight. I mean, it's a machine that we had to put in place to hire, retain talent, but we can do it. I'm happy to say that no one has left the company in the past 12 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the challenges DeepMind has is every now and then Elon Musk or Stephen Hawking warns that they're potentially going to be evil someday because the AI is going to do things that is not in the interests of humanity. How dangerous is the unrestrained use of this technology, and how do you work to ensure there's an ethical component to your research?
I think the ethical component is critical. We signed a pledge as Demis and other folks did. And it's important that the industry focuses on this, because as we know, governments take a while to react to things. So it's important that the industry understands where it's headed and puts the right framework around it. I do not believe for 1 second that what we're doing and what others are doing in industry is dangerous. We're not there yet. It will take a while. It will take a long time for this to become, this out-of-control science fiction stuff. But it's never too early to start to think about this and to put the right framework in place.
Well, we're going to be watching Sentient closely because you're doing all sorts of crazy, interesting things. Thank you very much for joining us. Antoine Blondeau.